The Real AI Podcast with Michael Hainsworth is brought to you by Microsoft.
Artificial intelligence isn't something that's coming. It's here today, with real solutions to real problems, like the problem of agriculture and food security. At Vancouver's Terramera, Karn Manhas has been working with Microsoft's Azure FarmBeats technology to make farming more sustainable and profitable for a farmer in an industry that pays them only 7 cents on the dollar. The techie biologist got his start by asking a simple question.
How can we use technology to unlock the intelligence in nature so we can build a world that thrives and provides for everyone?
And what's the answer?
That's an ongoing question.
We'll tackle these questions and more on this episode of Real AI, brought to you by Microsoft.
You know, I think that's a life's purpose of trying to answer that. That's what Terramera is focusing on doing every day. There's a lot to unpack in that. How do we use technology to unlock the intelligence in nature? But then how do we use that to build a world that thrives and provides for everyone? And that's, our first focus is in agriculture. That agriculture has this huge ability to be a force for good. Everyone needs to eat. It's one of our needs that every human has, that almost every human transacts for. There's exceptions where, somebody may be able to grow all of their own food, but almost we don't transact usually for water. Some of us do, but for food, how do we think about and be more conscious about how our food is grown? And how do we think about these systems that actually feed and nourish us, and be able to feed and nourish ourselves in a way that actually allows the planet to also be fed and nourished? And it's possible to do.
You have some pretty incredible pesticide and agricultural efficiency goals.
Yeah, actually, just before we get to that, I just want to have one little anecdote on that last point. We think about how we grow food right now, and we use a tremendous amount of the world's resources to be able to feed ourselves. We use a lot of synthetically produced and mined resources. Agriculture today is, depending on who you ask, about 15 to 25% of all of the world's greenhouse gases. It uses up around half of the world's fresh water. And, we think that's necessary. And it's because we need to figure out how to feed a growing population, which we do need to do. But it doesn't have to be an and or, a this or that. And that's a paradigm we've bought into. So how do we do both? If you look at ants, there's as many ants on the planet by weight as there are humans by weight. The ants that live on the planet eat 10 times as much food as humans do each day. But nobody says ants are eating the planet to death, because they're not. When they eat, they're part of the ecosystem. They're actually nourishing the planet and actually help build it back into a level of balance. They're burrowing. Their excrement also feeds the planet. We have, as humans, removed ourselves from the system, and we continue to have a paradigm of taking out, and that's not sustainable over even decades. It's not sustainable over the long term. And we have to think about things differently. And, right now we're eating the planet to death, but we actually have an opportunity to be like the ants and eat the planet back to life. And that's the potential of us understanding the complexity of the systems to achieve our goal of being able to feed the planet more, and a growing planet, but also do that in a way that's smarter. And that's the potential of AI to see that actually happen.
So then let's talk about those pretty incredible pesticide use and agricultural efficiency goals.
So we've set out a goal to use technology to unlock the intelligence in nature to achieve three audacious goals by the end of the decade. First, to decrease the load of synthetic chemicals per acre by at least 80%. We're using a huge amount of synthetic chemistry that's going out that stays in the environment. So how can we be much more efficient, do more with less? So 80% reduction of synthetic pesticides by the end of 2030, 20% increase in per acre yield by 2030, which if we we're able to scale that on a global scale would be enough to feed another billion people. And third, to increase soil carbon by 100%. So, that is tied to all of these things. When we actually look at this in a systems way, we can actually see these three goals are actually very connected in agriculture. They seem like they're separate things, but if we actually start looking at agriculture as a system and look at it at being smarter, as we increase soil carbon, for example, we actually increase the soil health. And as we increase the soil's health, we increase the plant's health, and we need less water, less fertilizer, less in terms of pesticides, and we actually see an increase in yield. It's estimated that for every 1% increase in soil carbon, we can see about a 20 to 70% increase in productivity out of that acre, which is huge. And the Earth's soil, before we started this before we, with well-meaning, started our focused industrial farming practices, had much higher levels of soil carbon. That level has gone down to a state where the average soil carbon on most farms is around 1%. In really good organic farms, you'll see that up to between 3 to 5%. But with regenerative agriculture practices, it's been seen to be even more than that. And we don't know what that top limit is. But for every 1% increase, we can pull out 10 tons of carbon per acre for every 1%. There's a huge ability to not only pull carbon out of the atmosphere to help solve the issues we have with climate change, but also make agriculture and our food production much more productive and more nutritious as a result.
AI is built on big data, and I can imagine there's a ton of data that is involved in the resources sector necessary to make agriculture possible. How do we collect that data? Agriculture has embraced types of technology for decades. So, mechanization, happened in the last half of the last century, and that mechanization also allows for data capture. We just have to backward integrate that more and more. So, still though, much of the data in agriculture is what I call dark data. So we're not actually collecting it right now, and so our challenges are severalfold. We have to make sure that we go and collect that data, that data is in a form that is standard and is usable for the type of analytics that we need to get out of it, and that data can actually travel from the farm to where it needs to go to be processed to be able to deliver that analytics. So, there's a cost to actually instrumenting and getting that data out there from the farm, and then actually moving that data and processing it. And it's starting to happen. There's if you look at precision agriculture, for example, it's just a mushrooming of companies that are looking at solving specific problems. The more that we can do to incent farmers to adopt technology, and I think engaging them in the fight for climate change is one of those ways. The more that we can not only help solve and get better outcomes for society, with better, more secure food production, but also better economic outcomes for those farmers, and better climate outcomes by sequestering more carbon. There may be a perception, farmers, they've got dirty fingernails, they're, salt of the earth types. They may not be very technologically inclined. Are you finding that's the case, or is the farming community and agriculture in general jumping on board this artificial intelligence bandwagon and adopting it wholeheartedly?
That's a stereotype. We love to put in stereotypes, and that's a stereotype we have in our mind of that farmer, and it's dirt under their nails and Luddite, but that's not the case. Farmers are just like all of us. They're a subset of the population. Just like you have people who are technophiles and Luddites, you have farmers that are technophiles and Luddites. You have the whole spectrum across farming. And so, one of the things that we think about a lot is how do you start showing the benefits to the people who are, the innovators and early adopters, and start solving that so that more and more farmers can actually see the benefit of agricultural adoption. In Silicon Valley and tech, one of the big Bibles of how you introduce new and disruptive technology was written by a guy named Jeffrey Moore, called Crossing the Chasm. And we think about crossing the chasm, and a lot of tech companies will think about crossing the chasm in like tech adoption and iPhone adoption. But actually, the whole premise behind that was agriculture. And he actually wrote that based on how farmers introduced new technology, in that case on bringing in new seed potato varieties. So it applies across the board. The critical piece is, how do we actually solve for the issues amongst that subset that will actually adopt and innovate and be part of that innovation culture, and then the early adopters. And we don't have to get everybody right away, but if we can show the value and the economic return to the growers, we'll be able to move through that spectrum to get the different layers of technologically open farmers.
What is the economics of using AI in agriculture? What's the sell job to a farmer who sits on the fence?
Well, farmers have a great natural intuition. They've run their farms for a long period of time, and they get a sense of what is right. The difficulty is, things are changing quite quickly, and particularly with climate change, it's making outcomes more and more unpredictable. So if you look at Canadian farm gate incomes, have dropped over 50% since 2016. That's not even including the issue of COVID. So outcomes that farmers are seeing are becoming more unpredictable, and they need better tools to be able to manage both, combining their intuition with data and better tools to help them make better decisions. I think they're looking for those. We have to make it easy, accessible, and meet the needs that they have. Talking to farmers, the number one things that they're always worried about is, I already have really thin margins. People don't realize in the dollars that we spend on food, very little of that goes back to farmers. The primary people who are doing the most amount of work to create our food, get less than 7% of that food dollar that we spend. And the margins and the costs are so high in operating these large swaths of land to grow the food, and the margins are so thin. So it could be cents that per acre that a farmer is actually making in terms of profit. And so the number one thing that farmers are worried about is, I can't take any more risks. So how do I manage my risk? Because if I adopt this new thing or this new technology, and all of a sudden my productivity and profits go below, I'm underwater. I can't do that. So how do we manage, first of all, the risks? And then let's talk about making sure that there's confidence in the opportunity. Farmers are very, I was going to say salt of the earth, but soil of the earth people. And they, it's very much show it to me. And so I think for us as using technology, as an ag tech company and a tech company in our industry, it's important not to just say what we can do, but show it. And that's going to be the critical piece in being able to increase adoption.
Ranveer Chandra is the chief scientist at Azure Global at Microsoft. He's behind the Farm Beats initiative, and he teamed up with Karn at Terramera. I wanted to get his take on farmers willing to adopt AI and Industry 4.0. He agrees with Karn. Money is tight.
You can't be putting lots and lots of sensors. It's going to be very expensive. But what you can do is, you can put a few sensors, you can combine them with other data streams, say from satellites, say from drones, say from farm equipment. And then if you combine these, you can then start building very accurate maps, enabling a lot of these AI applications on top of it. So that's the kind of thing FarmBeats does. It brings the best of technology, of AI, of Internet of Things, of edge of cloud computing, all of that to agriculture, so that other agricultural companies, ag tech companies, can build their solutions on top of it.
What was it like bringing these ideas to the farming community in the first place?
It was a lot of fun. It was and very challenging as well. It was when we started this project, when I started this back in 2014. I volunteered on farms. I talked a lot to farmers. I spent a lot of time talking to people worldwide, experts in agriculture, to academics. And what I realized is that these farmers, they work so hard. They spend a lot of time in the farm, starting early in the morning till late at night, working all of this time to make sure that we are all well fed. Yet, if to see the fact that they are the ones who don't benefit from all of these technology advances that we are making, coming in from Microsoft as a technology company, we build the latest in AI, we build the latest in cloud computing, yet to see that there was this significant population of the world who are so important in our livelihoods, who were not being able to use the benefits of technology. So this is where, once we started talking to them, once we started making it easier for them, you can see that the huge amount of benefit that you could get, the step gain that you get by bringing technology to growers, to this particular industry of agriculture and food.
Did you ever see an aha moment, a eureka moment come across the face of a farmer you were talking to about artificial intelligence for the first time?
Yeah, and the more you start talking to these people, they start realizing too that, hey, I didn't know this was possible. As an example, there is a grower in Eastern Washington. He uses these insights from AI to decide when to take his tractor out. So this particular farmer, he farms 9,000 acres spread across 45 miles. Every time he takes his tractor out, he would look at what is the predicted wind forecast in different parts of the farm, so that when he's applying the spray, it goes to the area where it is intended to be applied. Similarly, once he had this thing where he wanted to spray herbicide in his farm, for there was a spot that was severely infected with weeds. And he looked at the predicted weather forecast, and the weather forecast said that it was going to be 42 degrees, which was above freezing. But we were able to use AI to start making very hyper-local decisions of what's happening in the farm, not what's happening in the weather station. We were able to predict that it was going to be 31 degrees. It was actually 30 below freezing. It was good he didn't go and spray the herbicide, because that would have killed his plants. So these are some of the things where, AI can really help a grower make really good decisions. And every time we talk to a grower, be it anywhere, not just here in the developed world, even in emerging markets, you realize that they start seeing the benefits. They start seeing like, hey, if this data was there, I could start making these decisions if your AI could say what the future would look like. So we do see, and the unmet need, what we are doing is still scratching the surface with what we're doing with Azure FarmBeats and through our partners building the technologies. But the potential of what we could do is huge when we talk to these farmers.
That's Ranveer Chandra, the chief scientist at Microsoft's Azure FarmBeats. Back in Vancouver, Karn Manhas is dealing with more than just the economics of agriculture. He's addressing the impact on the environment. Agriculture is responsible for 25% of all greenhouse gas emissions. He's bringing 3 technologies together to fight for a cleaner future.
We are using computational chemistry, deep learning, and machine vision to be able to get better insights and better understanding of what's actually happening, not just from a macro level, but from a molecular level. What's actually happening in the soil? What's happening with the inputs that we're using? Where are they going in? And how is that modeled? Where are they going in the plant? Where are they going in the farm? How are they working to actually prevent pest and disease? What's happening in terms of their interaction with plants, and what's happening in terms of the interaction in the soil. And so we're using that to model what's happening both inside the plant and under the soil where we can't see. And the opportunity is that once we can get better tools that we can trust, that understand what's actually going on, we can actually build towards better outcomes. The opportunity for agriculture to not only feed a growing population and actually increase the productivity, increase incomes for farmers is massive. Right now, young people don't want to go into farming because the margins are too thin. You have all this opportunity in, a particular area, and every single machine learning engineer is going to get a job, but a farmer is going to be worrying about his subsistence for his or her subsistence from year to year. Which one is a young person going to choose? The thing is, we have to connect those things. The better we can actually model it using our computation and AI, and then actually test it out to see what's actually happening, to grow that accuracy, the better that we actually are going to be able to see what we're doing, how what we're doing is actually affecting the plants and the soil. And then you can start solving for some of these big problems. So there's about 1 billion acres of farmland between Canada and the US. If you had, I said this earlier, for every 1% increase in soil carbon, you can get 10 tons of carbon sequestered. So, do the math. That's 10 billion tons of CO2. And that's just a 1% increase in soil carbon, let alone getting 3, 4, 5, 7, 8% increases. And so the opportunities just even in Canada and in North America are enormous, let alone scaling this out to the whole world. We will need to have better tools, though, to understand that farmers can trust, that industry can trust, that governments do, that everyone can trust, that really shows what is happening and how much carbon is actually being sequestered. And farmers will need to understand how to relate that to their productivity and income.
Final question for you. How does AI and Terramera change the economics of agriculture?
How we change the economics of agriculture is reimagining how agriculture works, that it isn't just a trade-off between using these chemicals and protecting against loss, or doing this to increase sustainability or increase the amount of profits or yields, that all of those things are connected. And so when we can do that and actually engage farmers in sustainable practices that actually increase their farm income, we change and give them not just a new source of income, but actually more productive farms. We change the economics of agriculture. And we change how we grow food, because we actually need less in terms of chemicals and materials to actually be able to grow that food. And by using less, that's less that's actually part of the food that we are then ingesting in ourselves. So we're not only creating a healthier food system and healthier food, but also a healthier business for farmers that actually creates a healthier environment for all of us to live in. So everything that we're doing is based on deep learning and AI. And we're trying to understand the correlations between all of these things that we're doing to the farm, in a farm, and those things that we can't control. And we may still not know in 10 years from now how all those correlations and causations actually interact. But if we build a system that can optimize towards outcomes, then we have a powerful way to actually manage our resources, our water quality, our food security, our impact on the planet, and make agriculture a force for good.
Karn Manhas is the CEO of Terramera. I'm Michael Hainsworth. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the Real AI Podcast with Michael Hainsworth. Subscribe today and visit Microsoft.com/AI to see exciting real-world examples of real AI in use today.